Hello, everybody, and welcome once again to the Zelda Universe Podcast. We're grateful to all of you for taking your time and revisiting once again the many aspects of our adventures in Hyrule. My name is Connor Schultz, and I am your host for this podcast. Joining me today, we have one returning contributor and one brand new to the series, or at the very least to this format of the series. Returning once again, one of our features writers, Camille.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Wonderful to have you back. And brand new to the setup, Zach, if you'd like to introduce yourself.
Yes, hi, my name is Zach. I was a columns writer at Zelda Universe, one of the founders. I joined, Reese actually invited me, and I was one of the very first to start up the columns team, and I'm really glad to be here on the for the podcast.
Great to have you here with us. We've opened our podcast once again with a track from Medli's Melodies, the series in which columnists choose their favorite songs from the Legend of Zelda franchise. And this one is very interesting in terms of the split. You'll notice as we started off, it started off very kind of quiet, melodious, and then it's ramped up to a much more dramatic type of adventurous flair. This is the main theme from Hyrule Warriors: Age of Calamity. Camille, Zach, have either of you played Age of Calamity?
Oh yeah, day
I
one.
want to. I haven't
Awesome.
yet.
Oh, you haven't? Okay.
No.
Do you own it?
No, I don't.
All right. Well, for those of you who you're missing out. Well, for those of you who have never played any of the Hyrule Warriors, there's two, or Dynasty Warriors, I don't know how many of those there are.
A lot.
A lot? Okay.
A lot. There's a lot of those.
The Warriors genre is, I would almost call it like the direct opposite of what you normally expect from a Zelda game. While the Zelda games are a lone warrior adventuring through remote lands and diving into abandoned dungeons and things, solving puzzles, the Warriors franchise and Hyrule Warriors is all about killing as many things as humanly possible.
Mm-hmm.
Age of Calamity specifically takes a look at the period of time in our Breath of the Wild specific timeline before Zelda goes to hold off Ganon while Link recovers in the Shrine of Resurrection. So that 100 years before Breath of the Wild, we have all-out war happening. And the point of this story is to basically take part in that period of time in as much over-the-top, insane mob annihilation as humanly possible.
It seems like the song that in Medli's in the article was it kind of builds up. It's really delicate at first, and then it gets stronger and stronger. And from what you described, it seems to kind of pave the way for the tone of the game.
Oh yeah. Age of Calamity is the kind of game where you can basically summarize it as everything bad is happening, like constantly. Because it's called Age of Calamity, so you'd figure it would be. So it actually does a really good job of setting like the entire tone of the game.
Yeah.
It starts off with, I don't remember if it's exactly, but it's certainly very evocative of Breath of the Wild's theme, which is always very piano, melodious. And I vaguely remember when the trailer for this game first came out, and a lot of confusion about what was going on, and then suddenly everything started to ramp up. And then you start getting the trailer of what's happening in Age of Calamity and all of the conflict, and it's, oh, we're back into this again. All of the mayhem that is involved. Which, of course, we're going to... Sorry, go ahead, Zach.
I was just saying, I'm trying to remember who was the composer for Age of Calamity. Like, was it Was it someone from Koei Tecmo? Because they're the ones that do the Warriors and the Hyrule Warriors games. Or was it someone from like Nintendo?
It's an interesting question. I'm under the without looking anything up, my first thought would be that it would be Koei Tecmo doing it, just based off of what they've done with like the original Hyrule Warriors. It
Right.
seemed exceptionally like it was very Zelda-esque, but had a very unique flair to it.
Yeah, for sure.
Going
Which is-
into the credits here, it looks like the main composer is Tanioka. Let's see what his kind of background
Because Warriors
is.
games, like you know this from experience, Connor. Warriors games, like even the Dynasty Warriors, tend to be like just heavy, crazy rock, and it's all hectic and stuff. And even like with Hyrule Warriors, the first one, it was very much your traditional Dynasty Warriors style soundtrack, but with, obviously with Zelda remixes, which I thought was great because that was like just. I'm like, I don't even care if this game is good or not. I get a great soundtrack out of it because I love this stuff. But Age of Calamity was just like completely different from what they usually do for Warriors games.
Based on Akumi's what's the word? Discography, her things that she has done, everything from Final Fantasy XI in conjunction with some other composers, Final Fantasy Crystal Chronicles, Minecraft, Ragnarok Odyssey.
Wow,
she
these
did
are
do
all-
some. I say she did do some stuff for Super Smash Brothers Ultimate, and the ones for the 3DS and Wii U. So she has a pretty broad span. I don't see anything that says she specifically works for Nintendo or Koei Tecmo, to be perfectly honest.
Interesting. Because that would explain why the sound is so dramatically different from both Breath of the Wild and from Hyrule Warriors.
Which it all works wonderfully. And you take the Breath of the Wild music, which is all very calm and serene, and then you take those themes and put it into a much more of a battle type of deal. And it's fascinating to me, speaking as someone who just enjoys music, doesn't studied all that much, what you can do in order to take something from one genre or one tone and transform it into a completely different setup and change how that music makes you feel about a particular scene or music.
Definitely. And it's a main theme, so it has to be like the main theme is always one of the most important songs you can make in a game too, because it's the main theme. It's the one that people are going to associate the game with. Like if I say Breath of the Wild, the main theme of Breath of the Wild comes to mind. If I say Ocarina of Time, you think of the title theme and so on and so forth. And I think this does a really good job of portraying that too.
I liked the in the article it was talking about other games with a really impactful main theme too, and I really appreciated the Super Mario Galaxy mention.
Oh yeah.
Anytime that you have a theme, any piece of music really that sticks with you, it's always fun to be like, someone else enjoys that.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's one of the great things of people bringing up pieces of music and they just say, Gerudo Valley, Gerudo Valley, yes! There's just this feeling of unity of, yes, we all love this thing.
I also kind of like how in this article that Kayla also like went into super in depth of like the technical aspects of the music, because I grew up in going to band class, so I learned a lot of this stuff. So I was like, oh, it's actually really cool to like read the deconstruction of the music down to the technical elements of it too.
I learned piano growing up, and then really got into choir up through high school. And while I am not as familiar with the names of chords, since all I really had to do was read music and play the piano that way, there's still enough on here that I'm able to understand and follow, especially as I'm listening to the music. I do wonder how much of this flies over the head of someone who is not musically inclined or educated, it's probably the better term.
Right. I was also thinking that, but it's also kind of one of those things where it's like it's really cool that they bothered to write it like this too, because I've also seen, I have a friend over at RPG Fan who Patrick, he primarily does music reviews for RPGs, and he likes to write a lot of his stuff in a similar style to this. So I thought it was really neat.
All right. Well, thank you once again to Kayla Dandurand, who is at this point most certainly our resident songstress, and grateful to have her continuing contributions to Zelda's musical anthology is probably the best term for it. Well, keeping in line with our Breath of the Wild timeline, we're going to move a little bit further ahead from the Age of Calamity and to Breath of the Wild specifically, as we head into the desert and take a look in our Bomber's Notebook, the series where we take a special look at the various and unique characters found in the Legend of Zelda series. Standing right next to the Gerudo Chieftain is a tall and much broader individual, I think, than most of the Gerudo. Well-built is probably the polite way to put it. Buliara, the second in command, at least it seems that way, at the very least, captain of the guard for the Gerudo. And the first thing I remember when I saw her was, wow, Riju is really, really short compared to everyone else, because you have that exact juxtaposition right there.
Yeah, you're right. I'm looking at that picture and I didn't realize, I knew she was short, but I didn't realize she was that short now that you mention it. Holy cow.
Sometimes I wonder about aspect ratios in some of the camera work, because it does a really good job. But we also know that Riju is right about Link size, if maybe just a little bit shorter. And so she's not that short, but man, it really kind of gives the juxtaposition of Riju really has a way to go in her life before she reaches maturity. Which actually, now that I think about it, when do Gerudo get their growth spurt? Because it's not fully in there, but I feel like Riju is supposed to be about adult age, I think, by the time we get to Tears of the Kingdom. And she hasn't grown all that much yet.
Because Richu's kind of like the equivalent of a Gerudo teenager almost, isn't she? Because
I believe so, yeah.
She's very young for a leader, and that's a big reason why Buliara is so protective of her, is because she's still really young in terms of Riju. Because, if you know, I think a lot of the adult Gerudo in Breath of the Wild are far taller than you, aren't they?
Yeah, they are. I'm sorry, what? Nothing. Never mind. My joke has gone unacknowledged. Anywho, yes, Buliara is more the usual. She's probably a little taller than average, but that's a lot more consistent with the Gerudo that we see in this iteration of the tribe.
Right, because the Gerudo in Ocarina of Time are definitely not that tall.
Oh, no. No, they made a specific design choice when it came to these Gerudo, and I am not complaining.
Yeah, I like that physical I guess, diversity between races. And I guess you don't see that a lot in the older games because I've seen like different explanations for it about like I saw something and I don't know if it's true or not that like the Gerudo and Ocarina of Time they didn't have the resources to grow as tall as they did in Breath of the Wild. But there's also the like I guess the graphical restrictions back then is I don't know. I don't know why they're so much taller.
I would be a lot more prone towards that second explanation than
Yeah.
the couldn't grow enough resources, because it's still a freaking desert.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've always leaned towards that because I just don't think it makes sense.
Because and like in Ocarina of Time, everyone is about like all the adults are like the same height, no matter like if they're Zora or Goron,
Mm-hmm.
and Gerudo too. So I think that really is just more of a technical limitation.
Which,
Yeah.
good on them for recognizing that we have more stuff we can do. We can either expand on what we originally wanted to do or take things in a different direction because it adds a little bit more variety to the world that we are in.
Yeah, definitely. Their height makes them stand out. That's for sure.
Speaking of variety, this little factoid near the end of the article, little piece of information I didn't know, is that Buliara is known to be the best spearmaster among the Gerudo, and yet she wields a claymore.
I saw that too.
Is she just trying to amp up her intimidation factor?
I guess so, because the claymore would probably be much more intimidating than like a spear, I guess.
I guess, but considering her muscles, that's pretty intimidating as it is. That woman is built.
I also find it cool how, because I didn't know this either, she's apparently the only NPC that'll attack you if you attack her. Like, it doesn't do any damage, but if you attack her, she actually hits you and knocks you down.
As well she should. What are you doing trying to attack her?
True.
In her house, in their house. That's rude.
I also like how a lot of her backstory is also in the Chief's diary as well. I think that she's a great example because I know this is a hot button topic for a lot of people, but I always find it kind of funny at this point when people are like, Breath of the Wild doesn't have any story. And it's like there's tons and tons of like lore and extra details and the kind of things that I notice a lot of Zelda fans tend to want out of their games because there's just a lot to dig into. And Buliara is I actually like this article because Buliara is a fantastic example of a lot of of a character with a lot of depth that you really you wouldn't just talk to her and she would just bare her soul to you. You find it out by snooping around and reading the Chief's diary. And it gives a lot of depth to that character too, I think.
The way a story is told is, or obviously can be, very diverse depending on a multitude of factors. And unfortunately, the majority of the time we are told stories in one or two ways. We are either told it to us or we are directly shown it to us. It is a very, look at this thing. This is the thing that we're telling you. And it's a very effective, obviously, method of storytelling, but it's done so much to the point that less overt means of storytelling is a lot harder for individuals to necessarily appreciate. The nice thing is that this kind of storytelling that we are talking with Buliara is very in line with how Breath of the Wild structures its entire world and story. If you want to find out about some of these people, oh my gosh, you can find out.
Oh, definitely.
But it's not going to hand feed it to you unless you are directly involved in that person's character arc, which for the most part only involves a handful of people. And for someone
Right.
who is as, we'll put it this way, someone who is introverted as Link, he's not going to connect with every single person that he meets. As much as we kind of make fun of the fact that the main character always seems to have everybody spilling their guts out to them, that's not really how it goes most of the time. And so you really only get odds and ends about it, someone, unless you're able to make that investment. If you don't want to, that's fine. But the fact that it's in here means you can find out more if you're willing to investigate a little more. And that's great.
Mm-hmm.
It's the same thing with environmental storytelling. It's there, but it only means something if you're willing to stop, take a look, and try and see how this fits into everything that's going on.
Right. That's actually what I was going to bring up, was environmental storytelling is a big part of Breath of the Wild. And I know I'm going to say the thing that everyone's going to be like, oh, he said the game, but it's kind of like Dark Souls. It's like Dark Souls with its storytelling, because that's the game that popularized it. And because a lot of if you want to find out extra stuff in the Souls games, you have to go into the item menu and you have to read the description, and the description has like little tidbits that you find out, or you have to like look at the world and see what happened and kind of infer for yourself. And Breath of the Wild took notes from that in a lot of different ways, and Buliara is a great example of them doing that, and I think it worked really well, especially for this character type.
You know the great thing about being on this podcast for the first time?
What's up?
It's quite possible that nobody listening would have been like, oh, there he goes again, because this is the first time you've been here. You've called yourself out as that guy.
I did not. Okay,
you just did.
Look, if you go into any any gaming area and you say the words like Dark Souls, someone's gonna make a comment.
I mean, to be fair,
oh, there they go again, bringing up Dark Souls.
To be fair, the difficulty curve in Zelda certainly ramped up here and made it a little more Dark Souls-ish. It's okay to hold comparisons. I would just like to point out that the things about Dark Souls, go look at Adventure of Link. Dude, Adventure of Link was doing that way before Dark Souls existed.
I always bring that up.
And I should know that, because I love Adventure of Link.
There you go. There you go.
That's one of my favorite. That was my first Zelda game.
And it's perfectly fine. And it's perfectly fine to bring up influences from one thing on another. It's great to see, even if there is no direct quote that says, I was influenced by this game. There are connections, and I find it unlikely that game developers develop their games in a vacuum. They are aware of things that are popular. They are aware of other games as a form of inspiration, even if they don't specifically recognize it as such. Well, thank you very much to Caitlyn Drewett for shining the spotlight on Buliara. We appreciate always having her at Riju's side.
It's good stuff.
And so we move on away from the current timeline, shall we say, the current age of Zelda, and travel back into the past as we head into Zelda's Study, the series where we examine the history of The Legend of Zelda to bring some fascinating trivia. We explore game development, curiosities, fun facts, and interesting little tidbits about the series that we love. And today, Aren Taylan has brought us to Majora's Mask, which is where we're going to be spending the rest of our podcast. And fittingly enough, Aren is focusing on the first cycle of Majora's Mask, which is the time that we spend solely in Clocktown, our central hub of this game. And an interesting little tidbit in regards to how this first cycle of this game is governed. I'm absolutely fascinated to know who decided to grab a stopwatch and start timing this little factoid. The first 3 days that you spend in Termina, wandering around as a Deku scrub, with no way to reset time and nothing to do but to find everything you need to track down the Skull Kid. That 72 hours is actually a shorter 72 hours than the rest of the game.
By 50%, apparently.
It doesn't feel that way when you play it, and I think it's because that first cycle feels really restrictive, and because you can't go anywhere, it feels like it lasts a lot longer.
Now, if it's... I'm trying to do the math in my head. If it's reduced by 50%, does that mean that the time is cut in half? Or that it is more like cut down by a quarter?
I'm guessing a quarter, only because of like how it feels, but I'm not sure.
So if okay, so the time moves faster. It moves 50% faster, which means that every minute is actually a minute and a half. So what's the mathematical formula for that?
I failed at math, so I have no idea.
I'm a writer. I don't do math.
It's a question of rates, essentially. Because you're right, 36, the equivalent of 72 hours going to 36 hours doesn't make any real sense. It would have to be something like 54.
Well, how long is the cycle normally? Like, how many hours and minutes is it?
I've always worked under the assumption that
cycle.
I've always worked under the assumption that 1 hour was 1 minute.
Because if you could just figure that out, you could then like add that by like, you could then take 50% of that. Well, maybe.
As it turns out, we are not the first person to ask this question.
Oh.
We're taking a look. Okay. So normally, they even they even go further on this. This is according to Zelda Wiki. A normal day is 54 minutes. So 18 minutes a day. So yeah, 54. That would be... Yeah, that's 45 seconds. An hour. And then if you use the inverted song of time, you double that to 3 hours total, or an hour a day. And then that initial cycle that we're talking about right now, it's actually 27 seconds an hour. So it's actually sitting somewhere around 1 2/3 the speed. 10 minutes, 48 seconds a day, or just over half an hour. About 32 minutes and change. Oh, no, this is interesting. Time does not flow in the Lost Woods. Really? Time doesn't flow in the Lost Woods?
Neither. It doesn't in the actual clock tower either. Even if you're like really deep in the game and you go in there, you can just sit in there.
Right. I knew that the clock tower was always time stopped, and I knew that the moon was always time stopped.
No, the timer only goes whenever you enter Clock Town.
This one also lists the Lost Woods and the Catacombs as... No, the Catacombs can't be right. I'm positive that the Catacombs have...
Well, okay, and I guess once you're in the moon at the end of the game, the time also stops, but...
Right. The time aspect of Majora's Mask is both the most terrifying, but also the most fascinating part of this game.
Mm-hmm.
And it constantly amazes me how they use time, specifically in and around Clocktown, to govern how everything functions. This is the one place where things really feel like people are living there.
Yeah, definitely.
which is amazing considering you have places like Hyrule Castle Town and Twilight Princess where people are moving all over the place. You have all of the people in Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom where people are at different places at different times of the day. But the intricacies in how everyone interacts with each other during these 3 days is amazing to me. You do one thing and you affect change somewhere else.
Yeah. I remember playing this game when I was 9 or 10 years old. This was the first game I'd ever played that did anything like this, and I was just like going from Mario 64 to something like this on the same console was just incredible. Well, Mario 64 was like the first game that I played on the 64, and I think this was the last before I got a GameCube. And it was just an amazing example of like what that system could do, and that they even bothered to give like characters. The characters felt like they had agency in the world just because they had their own schedules, and you could do stuff to impact that with like side quests and stuff.
Yeah, at the end of the article, Aren was talking about feeling sort of guilty about having just realized this, but I see it with many other Majora's Mask fans is that even 25 years later, we find out new things about the game all the time. Sometimes I'll see YouTube videos where people, like us, they watch it and they're like, I didn't know about this dialogue. And it's fascinating.
I still haven't seen Camilla give Link a hug, so everyone
really
talks
cute.
about it. It's like, I've never seen it. I don't know what it's supposed to do to get it. This could very well be revisionist history, and I want to say that particularly the first few times that I played this game, which of course was 25 years ago, I felt like time went faster. But that could also just be because, and I'm sure it was, because I was just so panicked by the fact that there was a massive moon with a terrifying face plummeting to the planet. And
that'll do it. That'll give you a little bit of stress, maybe.
The motivation
just
too.
A little. That too. Yeah, Majora's Mask with like the moon coming at you and like constantly in view, along with the clock at the bottom that's constantly just turning. Like this game just ramped up the stress levels to 11.
I cannot think of. I'm going to say this, and I don't like absolute kinds of things, but I don't know if I can think of a more stressful countdown. Like, I think the countdown in Final Fantasy VII, the original, when the Mako reactor is blowing up and it counts down even in the middle of battles, that's pretty stressful. But I can't think of any more beyond that that's like, oh my gosh. Maybe one of the Metroids.
Oh my gosh.
I think
I can't think of any other really
Super Metroid, maybe. If you don't know where you're going, that's stressful, but not like to the same level of Majora's Mask where it's the whole game.
I'd be really interested what other like dramatic, fear, panic-inducing countdowns there are out there.
Like I can think of some in Banjo-Kazooie, but I don't know if that counts.
I can't get the last one. Oh my god, that's not really panic and more like rage-inducing.
Yeah. I was thinking of the one in Bubble Gloop Swamp where you have 10 seconds to get it and you have to go across the tiny thing and it's super stressful, but I don't know if that counts.
I'm thinking of Diddy Kong Racing, and there was that, I don't know if you guys have played that.
Yes.
I don't remember his name, but it's the clock character, and when you're trying to, like, acquire him, basically, you have to, like, beat the timer.
Yeah.
That's horrible.
Yeah. See, I never did that because that game was too hard for me, so I never got that far to do that.
I was so proud of myself when I beat that game.
It's hard now.
I want to play it. Oh my gosh, get that on the NSO, Nintendo.
I think his name's CC. Or is it
TT?
Okay,
Yeah.
TT for time trial.
Right, yeah, that's what it was.
Well, before we get too deep into other franchises,
Oh yeah, sorry.
thank you so much to Aren Taylan for bringing this timely factoid into our lives. And we will continue on in the realm of Majora's Mask as we reach our feature of the month. And that is why Camille is back. As Camille, you've actually been pretty busy with writing some things this last month. You had two different things that you wanted to chat about. Unfortunately, we decided to forego the bunnies. I apologize.
This one's more interesting.
This is okay.
I just want to talk about.
Oh, good. Well, then I'm glad that we're sticking with Majora's Mask as we look at the atmosphere that Majora's Mask has brought upon all of us in its gameplay. Not just overall, but section by section. When I started looking at this, I was reminded of the very popular, when it first came out, I'm pretty sure it's been fairly disproven at this point, but it pops up every now and again, the Link is dead theory.
Oh boy.
I think we talked about that last time too.
Oh, did we?
I think we
Well,
did.
for those of you who are unfamiliar, this was a very popular theory when Majora's Mask first came out. And the idea is that Link actually dies at the beginning of Majora's Mask, either by being thrown off from his horse or when he falls through the tree and you see all those creepy shapes as he falls down before being turned into a Deku Scrub. The idea being that every section of Termina is supposed to represent a stage of grief as Link processes his death and his loss while helping other people do the same as they all kind of go off into the afterlife. It's been fairly rejected. I don't know if debunked is strong enough since it keeps popping up every now and again, but there is certainly something to the sectional nature of every realm and the emotions, the separate emotions that each one tends to produce.
Mm-hmm. I think atmosphere is Majora's Mask's probably its biggest quality. Mm-hmm. And I was replaying the game recently, and I think I was in Great Bay when it kind of clicked to me, because I came in from the overworld of Termina and I came into Great Bay, and I noticed a very contrasting, I guess, transition of like emotion, and I wanted to explore that and like, why do I feel this way, and why, because it's almost like the topography of every region of the game kind of aids and lends to the story in that moment, like with Lulu and her loss and everything. I think that it's very it matches really well with the way Great Bay looks and how it feels in the music, and I love that.
Yeah, I wanted to tell you, I read this, and this is an excellent feature, by the way. You did an amazing job with this.
I appreciate it.
This was very well written. I really liked what you had to say about Woodfall, especially, because I hadn't even put, like, the way that you describe it is so perfect, and it actually, like, it's that thing where I'm like, how can I explain this feeling that I'm getting from this? And like, I want to put it into words, but I can't. And then you actually did it, and I'm like, oh my gosh, this suddenly, how I felt about Woodfall suddenly like is just put into words, even though it's like a couple of paragraphs. It's like, this is perfect.
That's
like
very flattering. Thank you.
Yeah, no, it's an amazing article. Like the
we talk back to
being poisons. Sorry, what?
We reference back to Buliara and how Breath of the Wild does such a great job with environmental storytelling. Mm-hmm. This is another one of those situations where if you're just going through and taking care of everything and beating the game, especially if you're like speed running it or something like that, you will miss the finer details, because it's always, I don't want to say if it's bugged me, but it certainly has not escaped my notice that the theme of distress in all 4 of the major sections are very, very similar to each other. And if you're not paying attention, I know this has happened for me, where I think they're just playing the same music. It's just the same theme. Oh, yeah, they're in trouble. I got to go save them. I got to go save them. And then it's the main theme again. It's like, okay, I've restored everything. But it's not the same theme. The music is different every time. And it plays into the environment, not just in terms of the music, but also in terms of what specific problem is happening in each location.
And with that, I think like Clocktown, it kind of encapsulates like I think all of Termina, which makes it even more chaotic because it's so central to the story.
I love how the music picks up with every day, because it particularly the first cycle you're going through. We already talked about how everything speeds up just physically, but the music has spun up to the point where it's just like it's like the very fabric of the world is trying to keep from panicking.
And it's funny too, because you can, like, you might not even think about that, because on day 2, like, the music's a little bit faster because it's raining, and so you're like, oh, it's just a rainy day. Like, it's kind of hectic a bit because everyone's running around because there's all sorts of rain and stuff. And then by day 3, you're like, oh, everything is terrible, actually. Look at that moon. And it's just awful and chaotic.
I wish that if one thing that I would quote unquote change about Majora's Mask in terms of its storytelling would be something along the lines of Link and Tattle come out of the clock tower, and Tattle says aloud, like, why 3 days? And either someone around them says something about the Carnival of Time being in 3 days. You kind of have to piece all this stuff together. But at some point, it's like, why 3 days? And then you look up and you see the moon. You're like, oh, that's why.
I love how the sky, it kind of turns red no matter where you are on the final day.
And that last 12 hours always reverts to the same music. Because it doesn't matter where you are, there is no hope.
That is one of my favorite details in the game, is that the last 12 hours just plays the final day's music. It's just like, oh, this is happening. I should do something. Like now. It's actually, excuse me, sorry. It's actually really funny because you brought up looking up and seeing the moon, but now that I think about it, there's not a lot of instances where, except for like when you go into the mayor's office, the NPCs actively talk about, hey, the moon up there is getting closer. Like, that's just something you just kind of notice yourself for the most part.
And that's one of the things that leads to that theory, or supports the theory of Link being dead. The first stage of recovery, the first stage of grief, is denial. And everyone in Clocktown is in a state of denial that something is going wrong. And it's only at the very end when they're like, well, crap.
I don't subscribe. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I don't subscribe to him being dead, but I really love that connection. I don't remember his name. It's a really popular YouTuber. He's the one who kind of, I think, popularized the theory. But the Link is dead theory is something I really love, is the connection between the 5 stages of grief and every area in Termina too.
Whether or not something is intentional, oftentimes is irrelevant. It's one of those things about the interpretation of art. The piece is out there. The person who created it had particular motivations, inspirations, messages they wanted to get across, etc. And that's all well and good, and great on them for making that thing. But when a person takes it and their life experience transmits a different message to them, it's in some cases, it doesn't matter whether or not that message was intentional or not. There's a cool connection that, whether on purpose or not, adds a additional level of flavor to whatever is going on. I roll my eyes sometimes when I see people making the most obscure connections between something in a movie, like, oh, this Greek movie had such and such. Look what it is in ancient Greek. Look how they paired this up. It's like, really? Did they really do that? I don't know. But it is cool that's what it ended up being.
Right.
And so if you can take those kinds of lessons of recovery and grief and healing, which is a big part of Majora's Mask, then all the power to you. That's awesome.
Yeah, because each of the, like, I don't personally agree with Link being dead or anything, but every single area, every major area in Majora's Mask definitely has some form or differentiating form of despair and sadness in it. And like, it basically, I think they really did just take all of those ideas and just say, this area represents this, and this one represents this element, and this one represents this element. Because no matter where you go in the world, there is just an overwhelming amount of just bad things happening in each zone. Like in Woodfall with the poison swamp, or Snowhead, which is supposed to be which is just overflowing with snow, and so on and so forth.
Mhm.
I'm thinking of them in terms of my experience playing Dungeons and Dragons, and as a person who runs those kinds of games. When you're creating an adventure, one of the primary ways that you do that for your party is you think of a problem. What is the problem? What is it that you want the adventuring party to accomplish? You start with that and you say, okay, this is here's the issue. And we'll take Woodfall as the example. The swamp is poisoned. All right, and we want to fix the poison in the swamp. Okay, so what caused it? And what has the local populace tried to do to address it? And what consequences has that led to? And then the party shows up and tries to accomplish it and fix the problem themselves. And that runs the gauntlet, and that's pretty much the same with any kind of adventuring type of game that you're going to end up, whether it's Zelda or any story-based RPG, anything like that. That's a basic format that runs through. What adds the level of depth to any of those situations is the tone, the things that you're talking about in the article, Camille, the atmosphere that is being provided, how that creates a overall impact on the populace, because you can act in a vast number of ways to your local water source being poisoned all of a sudden. And a lot of the responses, you could say, are pretty understandable in a lot of ways. Anger, scapegoating, that is definitely something that would happen. And so choosing that atmosphere, whether anger or despair, it creates a different environment that the hero has to address. There are more things that a person needs to heal from than just a physical injury.
Yeah.
And May being a Mental Health Awareness Month, if I recall correctly, it's an excellent time to be able to talk about those kinds of things.
Mm-hmm.
I remembered the I just wanted to bring it up while I still remember, but the YouTuber I was referencing was Matt Pat, who made that really popular Link is Dead video.
Good old game theory.
Yep,
But that's just a theory.
a game theory.
It's more a proposal. It's an option.
So, you mentioned this in the feature. I didn't actually know that Crimea apparently loved cafe.
Yes.
There's a lot of hinting at it, yeah.
I never actually knew that until I read this. Like, that's actually a really cool, like, another extra layer that I didn't know about.
I kind of wish that they explored that just a little bit more.
Me too.
Crimea is dealing with so much, and we only see a fraction of it.
Yeah.
She's managing the farm. She's getting not just active competition, but downright sabotage from her competitors. She has a younger sister that she's trying to keep alive and happy and raising her. Obviously, both of her parents are dead. The cows are vanishing, or at the very least getting agitated. Her sister's on and on about ghosts.
Yeah.
And she says no idea. Whatever is going on, she doesn't know what's happening. And on top of it, her love is getting married to her best friend. That's a lot.
Yeah. It really puts even more emphasis on that hug that she gives Link, because it's like finally she has something go right, you know? Like that's kind of like a moment where it's just like finally everything that's gone wrong in her life, like something finally went right, and it feels like she can finally maybe take steps towards recovery, now that I think about it like that.
One of the most poignant messages in Majora's Masks that you don't see very often, but you can see just often enough, is that not everything is quote unquote fixed in Majora's Mask. People are still dealing with the fact that the butler's son is dead. Crimea still has a lot of things that she has to deal with. There are still questions to be had in the mountains and in Icona. There are still pirates. They haven't stopped pirating.
Yeah. Stealing eggs, no less.
And that's the nature of life. But having the ability to continue to press onward, to accept and move forward with that pain, is a major stepping stone towards healing. Icona Canyon is my favorite section, environment, and not necessarily environment-wise, but in terms of backstory-wise. It hints at a backstory very similar to what we see in Ocarina of Time with the Shadow Temple and Hyrule's dark past.
Oh, yeah.
And I would love to know what kind of things Icona's kingdom was up to that caused them to be in this situation where they could be in a position to be cursed like this and put under Majora's influence.
Gosh, speaking of atmosphere with Icona, the Icona atmosphere is one of my favorite parts of the entire game. Especially when you get to like the music house. Like there's all this, there's like the dead is everywhere. There's Gibdo, Redeads are around, and there's just this music box that's going.
I hate that music box sound. If I'm perfectly honest, I find that song to be so grating on my ears.
Well, I mean, the Gibdo clearly feel that way too, because that's what causes them to fall into the ground.
Are you calling me undead?
Maybe.
Dang it, I am old.
about the same age, I think.
I'm 37.
Yeah, I'm 34. We're almost the same age.
Okay, there you go.
I guess I can call you old man if you want. No,
I'm 37. I'm not old.
No, the juxtaposition of the music combined with everything just makes that whole entire area so much more messed up than it already is in a way.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I remember as a kid, it took me a long time to actually drum up the courage to get through that section because I had a terrible fear of zombies as a child, and by extension, the mummies, the Gibdos, were also basically just re-deads anyway, so they also kind of counted in my brain as zombies. And so, like, but at the same time, the atmosphere contributing to all of what was going on around it actually made me also like that area the most and made me want to push on despite that to see what the heck was actually going on in that area. And so that area, like every time I think about Majora's Mask, I actually end up thinking about Ikana and that whole entire section. Also, making the Redeads dance was like some kind of catharsis for my brain as a child.
Yes.
Because I was like, oh, if I wear this mask, they dance, and now they're not scary anymore. I mean, they're still scary, but I don't totally hate them now.
Nothing makes a thing less scary as making them funny.
Exactly.
I love there are so many examples in Ikana of regret. And passing those regrets and those desires to Link to solve is hauntingly beautiful. The captain's request. I love the captain asking to take leave and Link granting it to him is such a emotional moment. Every single one of them recognizing that they should not be here. Mm-hmm. They don't want to be here, but they can't get out. It's visceral. It's emotional, and it hits you in a very different way than you normally expect from what we colloquially call a feels moment. There's something very real about wanting to move on, and yet for some reason being bound to something.
For sure. That was something I didn't really appreciate until I got older. Because when I was a kid, I was like, oh, they're just zombie guys that are just stuck here. But I didn't really like parse any of that. And that's kind of the great thing about Majora's Mask is the older you get, the more it makes sense, right? Mm-hmm. Like, it's one of those games that has that replayability because it's like, oh, I didn't realize when I was playing it of all of these little intricacies and the things the characters were saying and doing. And that's why it's one of my favorite games to go back to, because I always learn something new or realize something about it that I didn't realize because I'm older and wiser now. Wiser being subjective, but... Now, I also really like the Pamela section as well. That's probably one of the darkest things I think that might be one of the darkest things in a Zelda game, just because her father is slowly turning into just a Gibdo, and we've seen what Gibdo do, right?
I wish we saw more of it, honestly. But that is a very emotional moment.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, the idea of being cursed like that.
Yeah. It's like the more you think about it, the more it's just like, oh.
Well, it's the idea of the curse spreading. It's more than just, I am stuck here. It is, this is something that can expand. Obviously, every single problem that every section is dealing with could potentially expand into other areas, but there are other sources of water. Yes, it's cold up in Snowhead, but there's enough climate diversity that they'll probably be fine. The Great Bay it's concerning, but it's not essential by itself if fishing is not doing so well. But Ikana, that's zombie apocalypse type of stuff.
There's also Sakon's hideout, which kind of adds a layer of
Oh yeah, you're right.
creepiness.
I forgot that was in that area for a second. Yeah.
Why creepy?
Master Thief.
I'm curious why you think Sakon's hideout makes it creepier.
I think just because isolated over there, and anytime I'm not participating in the Cafe and Anju quest, and I see him kind of around there, he's just kind of going in a circle, like aimlessly, or you don't see him at all. And just knowing that it's there and that he's caused all that pain to Cafe and everything. I don't know. There's something a little bit, I guess maybe it's just me, but there's something kind of creepy about the whole, the black market kind of part of the game, because it's almost like, you're not supposed to see this kind of feeling. And also when you're in the hideout, he's not even there. It's really weird. It's like a surreal place. It's also really colorful. It's kind of off-putting.
Yeah, that's actually a good point.
Yeah.
I didn't even think about the whole black market section. Yeah, the more I think about that, the more it's like, because you are ultimately, at the end of the day, Link is a child, and you're like looking at the dark dealings of adults, and it makes you wonder, like, because I imagine a lot of us, when we first played Majora's Mask, we were all kids, and we saw stuff like that, and it was like, it's obviously unsettling as an adult, but as a kid, it's like they're talking about the extremely scary dark side of adults. And that section actually does a really good job of portraying that.
Ocarina of Time, you have a 10-year-old suddenly transformed into the body of a 17-year-old. We can debate the exact years, but that's essentially what you're looking at. A prepubescent, not even maybe preteen, suddenly becoming an adult. And from a storytelling perspective, Link would have absolutely no idea. And for us as 10-year-old-ish players, that's all we are ever thinking about is, aha! We have the great adult form! Let us go into battle! Majora's Mask actually teaches you what being an adult involves. It's no longer just the adventure and the glory and the excitement. There are consequences, and there are hurts that you don't solve just by defeating a monster.
Yeah. And I think even just the beginning of Majora's Mask is sort of, it kind of portrays that, because Link did defeat Ganon and he did everything he was supposed to, but Navi's gone and he never saw her again, probably. And I think he learned the hard way that life just doesn't work out, the way you intended.
I just finished replaying Ocarina of Time on my live streams, and what I tried to do was expand the story contained in Ocarina of Time. And what I see as Link returning at the end of that game and meeting with Zelda and setting things right in that time, it's more than just losing Navi, I think. Mm-hmm. He lost his home and his very identity. He had his whole situation in life completely upended because he is now an orphan child in a world that he does not know. And he's trying to find the one aspect of that he feels he could still grasp onto and can't find her anywhere.
Yeah, because she was his literally his guiding light, essentially. Like whenever he didn't know what whenever he didn't know what to do, she would tell him, much to the chagrin of the fan base. And like that was just that's just like, but that's what she was. She was his guardian, right? And now that he doesn't have that anymore, yeah, you're right. Like, what does he do? Where does he go? Because he did get forced into an adult body and kind of experienced adulthood in a weird sort of way, but he was still, I always like to think that he was still a 10, 11-year-old, what have you, like in his mind as an adult in Ocarina of Time.
Oh, absolutely. The way I picture it, his time when he awakens as an adult, instead of just having that scene in the Chamber of Sages, Rory would actually take time to kind of train Link, just so Link understands what it's supposed to be like moving in a body that is suddenly like twice his original height and proportions. Because it's like, oh yeah, no, I am now this. How does this do? Ruto talking about fiance and marriage, and Link is like, wait, what? What are you talking about? What is marriage?
What's a fiance?
Yeah, I mean, it even points that out, like in the dialogue when you get the sapphire. Marriage? You don't know what she's talking about, but you got all the stones. That's cool. That's essentially that's essentially how it describes it as.
I wasn't planning on coming back anyway, so whatever it is, whatever. Bye. Surprise. Whatever your beliefs are regarding Link's situation in Termina, I like to think that your impressions of him at the end is that of hope. We know that there's the whole Stalfos Link type of deal in Twilight Princess, and many people, including Nintendo, have made connections between that and Majora's Mask and Ocarina of Time. I would still like to hope that the impressions for Link at the end are that of optimism. The music and the atmosphere provided there are hopeful tones. No, things are not perfect. No, Link has not found Navi, as was his original intention, but there is still positive things that have come from his journey, and positive things that he can still find as he continues onward. And that is probably one of the major lessons that Majora's Mask teaches us.
Yeah, this journey might focus on a lot of other characters around you, but it is also, in a weird way, it's kind of like healing for Link himself as well, to kind of find his footing in life too. Because I hadn't even considered that, yeah, he is kind of just, he's an orphaned child who just kind of has to figure out his way now, and going to Termina. Dang, where am I going with that thought? I lost. Oh no, it's gone. Where'd it go?
No, Thread, come back.
Brain farts.
I hate that. We certainly don't want to end on a brain fart. Camille, any parting thoughts?
I guess I just wanted to mention that I think everything that we've talked about with Majora's Mask and everything that we touched on, even with Breath of the Wild, even though I haven't fully played it, we discussed in this entire podcast my favorite things about the franchise, and how, you have to read between the lines, and how it's a lot more complicated than just saving a princess and, finishing the game. There's so much more.
Thank you for pointing out some of those aspects to us. Thank you, Zach. Thank you, Camille, for being here with me today for a new episode of the Zelda Universe Podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for having me too. This was a lot of fun.
Great. Hope to see you both real soon. Everyone who's listening, thank you so much for being here with us. We put these out about once a month. We hope to see you again in June. And by that point, some of you may have your Switch 2s. So perhaps we'll talk a little bit about that, as well as other adventures that we have been having here in Hyrule. Have yourselves a wonderful rest of your May, and we will see you next time on the Zelda Universe Podcast.